Hi, this is Brian Ference. You can follow me on X at BrianFerence1 with the MAGAMind Today, we are doing a live stream while also doing a space. This is an X space on Scott Presler starting very soon. You can visit my profile on X for the link. Also, the information being discussed the data will be shown on realscottpresler.com, REALSCOTTPRESLER.com. So please do check that out during the live space. This potentially will go about 2 hours. We're going to have multiple speakers. On this live stream, you'll just see me. It'll be an audio X live space, but I'm live streaming this video as well. I got my big balls hat on, as usual. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up the space in just a second here. The way the X space works is you have to do it off the app, off your phone, unless you have a virtual emulator on your computer, which I didn't set up yet. So I'm going to be doing it off my phone, but it's good because I can live stream this at the same time on my computer. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up the space a little early. It's supposed to start at 5 p.m. MST. It's about 10 minutes before. So I'm going to go ahead and start that now in case there's a problem or slow part. It's asking me, who do I want to invite to it? So I'm just going to tag a couple people. Let's see. I believe it pulls in by default like the last 20 people that you interacted. I don't know. Let's see. So I'm just tagging them, and then it's going to send it to them. All right, that's enough. So it looks like we are live. This is Brian Ference on the Scott Presler's False Narratives Exposed by Data and Evidence space. We opened up about 9 minutes early. So please, my mic was off, so I'm going to repeat that again. Hi, this is Brian Ference at BrianFerence1 with the Scott Presler False Narratives Exposed by Data and Evidence. We opened up a few minutes early, so please do bear with us just as we get set up. Hopefully my audio is coming through loud and clear. Please let me know if for some reason it's not. Again, this is Brian Ference with the Scott Presler False Narratives Exposed by Data and Evidence. We will have several speakers here today. And let me go ahead and just message my co-host to make sure they can join. I see several listeners are on. Please just bear with us as we're getting started. We're a couple minutes early, about 8 minutes early, actually. And let me go ahead and invite him. There we go. All right, so I've sent that co-host invite. And we do have several listeners that have joined, so I'd like to welcome you. We're opening up about 7 minutes early still. Again, this is Brian Ference on the Real Scott Presler False Narratives Exposed by Data and Evidence X Space. Let me know in the comments. Hopefully everyone can hear me pretty well. And we're going to get started in just a few minutes. I need my co-host to join. Please do also take a look at a website, which is realscottpresler.com. I'll go ahead and put a link in there as well, but it's REALSCOTTPRESLER.com. That will have a lot of the evidence that we're going to be going over today. Let's see. All right, yeah, I'm going to see if I can put that in the space as well. Let me comment here. And let me post this. And we'll just wait for a few more minutes. I'm getting a ping now from my co-host, who should be joining shortly. And then we'll get started. All right, I'm just putting, oops, I spelled it. It would help if I spelled it correctly. So again, it's realscottpresler.com, realscottpresler.com. That's where a lot of the evidence and data is. I am posting that now. In the comments. Yeah, there it is. All right, and I'm going to, let's see. Yeah, I do see there's a couple requests to speak coming on. Just hold on a minute while we get everyone in here. Let's see who requested the speaker. Okay. Yep, I'm going to approve that one. And just waiting for my co-host to join. Again, this is Brian Ference. I'm posting this link in here. Let's see. Looks like it didn't come up yet. So let me go ahead and do that again. Okay, yeah, it should be in the comments. Okay, I'm going to add it to highlight. And it's realscottpresler.com. I'm just waiting for my co-host to join. Looks like a bunch of the listeners are coming in. We're still about 4 minutes early. Hopefully everyone can hear me fine. Ooh, I want to do that. And if you were identified as one of the speakers, go ahead and request the mic. I may not promote everyone to speaker until we get to your speaking spot. We do have a certain order we're going to go in today. Again, we're still about 4 minutes early. And I'm just waiting for my co-host to join. Let me see if he sent me a message. Not yet. That's okay. All right, so again, my name is Brian Ference. This is a space. It's Scott Presler's False Narratives Exposed by Data and Evidence. We will be reviewing on realscottpresler.com a lot of this evidence. And we're just giving a couple minutes for everyone else to join, including my co-host. So just bear with us for a minute, please, since we're early. All right. Let me turn this down here. Yeah, and this space is being recorded, just so everyone's aware. Right now, we've got about 38 listeners. We're 2 minutes out from starting. So please just do stand by. David, I think you're on as a speaker. If you want to unmute yourself for a second, I just want to check your audio and make sure that my audio is fine.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. There's Kitty in the background.
Yep, I can hear that cat audio real nice and clear. How's my audio?
Sounds good.
Okay, good. Mark should be joining hopefully in a minute. Let's see. I do see there's a couple other requests to speak. I'm going to approve right now Tony Shoup from Audit Vote Review, and I'm going to also approve EM1 Gen X. Sorry, I forget your real name. But just a note on the speakers. So we're going to run this space in a little bit different way. It's going to be very organized. We're going to focus only on the data. I'm going to present first. We're going to be reviewing data from realscottpresler.com. And we're going to not do any personal tax. We're not going to focus on, personal lifestyle choices, personal tax. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to focus on the data, and we're going to focus on some of the claims which Scott Presler has made, which have been proven inaccurate. We're going to focus on that. We are going to go in order of just approved speakers, and then at the end we can potentially open it up. But if anyone starts involving personal attacks, or if they are not following the rules of the space, then they will be muted and demoted back to listener. So we're going to follow that pretty closely. We're just about at 5 o'clock now. I still haven't seen my other co-host show up yet. So let me just ping him again. Okay, yeah, he messaged me. He's joining in just a minute, taking care of some last minute business. All right, so again, this is Brian Ference. We have about 123 people in the space now and more coming online. So we're giving just a few minutes. My host is joining momentarily. We do have a number of guest speakers coming up. I would ask everyone that's on the space right now, please do like and repost and share this space. We'd like to get as wide an audience as we can. It is being recorded. So please do share this as much as you can, as well as the link that we're going to be reviewing, which is realscottpresler.com, which has a lot of the data and evidence that we'll be going over. Yeah, thank you to everyone who's commenting there. Please do share that space. And then as soon as my co-host joins, then we'll get rocking. But I'll take care of just a couple more things. Let me just see who else I have here on the speaker requests. Okay, I see Zach there. Zach, I'm going to add you as well. Just a note to our speakers, we do have a specific order that we want to go in initially, so I will be identifying that, but just reminding everyone on the rules of this space. We're going to focus just on the data. We're not going to focus on any personal attacks or any lifestyle choices. And we're going to talk about any comments or things that maybe Scott has made that have been disproven. We're going to focus on the evidence. So if anyone is violating that, they will be muted and then demoted down to listener. So please do follow that. I'm just waiting for my co-host to join, which he should be shortly. While we're doing that, I'd like to kick off just with a prayer. So, please do bow your head and join me in prayer. Dear God, I'd ask that this space be blessed. I'd ask the speakers be protected and blessed and given a spirit of true discernment and wisdom so that the truth may be spoken in this space and that all bad actors or technical difficulties be silenced and rendered useless against the truth. And I ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you very much. So let's see if my co-host has joined. All right, he has not joined yet, so I'm probably going to get started since it's 5:03. I would ask everyone to please, again, share and repost this space. The evidence that I'm going to be covering first is on realscottpresler.com, so please do go over there while I'm talking about it. And I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then as soon as Mark comes on, I will introduce him as the co-host, and then after I'm done speaking, we will go in a specific order. I think Mark just came on. Let's see, there he is. Hold on. All right, Mark, I'm also adding you as a co-host. I sent you a co-host invite. Mark, I just gave you can you hear me okay?
Got it. Yeah, I got you. I was looking for the co-host invite. I didn't see it, so I just grabbed the normal one.
Let me resend it to you. So it said it just sent it to you now. Do you see it?
Got a left Twitter here. Let's see here. Let me look here. I do. How'd you send it to me?
Oof, I don't know. However, Twitter does it, but let me see if I can just click on your name and invite to co-host.
Right.
Yeah, it still sends you a co-host invite. I'm not sure how it's sending to you. It looks like it's a notification in the X app, maybe.
Okay. Well, I got to go to the app. I'm on a computer right now. All right. Let's see here.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it sends you that, but I did request that it invite you to be co-host.
Oh, there we go. It finally popped up here.
You got it?
All right.
All right, so I think you just have to accept that. And then, Mark, before you joined, I opened us with a prayer that, everyone here on the call and the speakers have a spirit of discernment and wisdom, and that, any bad actors be silenced, any technical hurdles be overcome so that the truth can be told. And I just kind of, again, laid down the ground rules, so please help me enforce that we're not going to focus on any personal attacks or personal lifestyle choices. We're going to focus on the data, and if any of the speakers violate that, they'll be muted and then demoted down to listener. So we're going to just focus on the data. It's on realscottpresler.com is what I'm going to be reviewing first, and then Mark will be the second speaker. And then I have as the third speaker will be David Gordon from the Virginia Project. And then the fourth speaker will be Tony Shoup from Audit the Vote PA. And then we will go in order with some additional speakers after that. I think probably Zach and then Emily after that. But again, please do follow those rules for this space. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So please do visit realscottpresler.com. And, there's some important questions there that's asked, who is the real Scott Presler? Is this really there's a quote, it's like a homeless dog walker that picks up trash. There's some other questions like, is that truly what's happening here? And then, there's some evidence and I'd like to start off with, there's a video that Mr. Presler and Early Vote Action posted. It's on the Early Vote Action X account pinned at the top. And it's basically promising a win in the Wisconsin Supreme Court election. It's saying, we're going to deliver, we're going to win, we're going to ballot chase, download our Early Vote Action app. We're going to, push mail-in voting, push early voting, and we're going to win. And of course, that's not what happened. It was a historic loss. Susan Crawford defeated Brad Schimmel by nearly 230,000 votes, a 10% margin of victory. So clearly, Scott Presler and Early Vote Action and Turning Point's plans and game plan was not effective. It did not deliver victory. That's just the facts. And this was the second crushing defeat because prior to that, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, we saw the Senate seat, which had previously been held by a Republican for 35 consecutive years, and that was kind of a shock loss. So on the website, again, realscottpresler.com, it talks about, it shows a bunch of screenshots. It shows, Scott Presler and Turning Point. They're there in Wisconsin. They're there in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of money and a lot of fundraising going on. They put their full time and effort into these efforts. There's a number of screenshots showing them door knocking, promoting their app, get out the vote, make calls. Scott Presler was on the ground with multiple other influencers. So all of their efforts were there in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, including fundraising. There were several nationwide fundraiser emails and texts that went out. Scott Presler said in one, I need help. I'm too busy chasing ballots in Wisconsin to write a catchy text. Please sponsor a ballot chaser. And of course, these links went to WinRed, which is another point of concern and contention. I'm not going to dive too deep into WinRed, but I would recommend never donating to WinRed. You should always donate to a candidate or a charity or a cause directly. Do not go through WinRed. There's lots of reasons why. We'll cover that later. But there's a lot of other texts and emails. One said, ballot chasers in the Wisconsin Supreme Court are running on fumes. We desperately need sponsors, Scott Presler. And then an email that went out, also nationwide, sponsor a ballot chaser. We don't have a minute to waste, and I know I can count on you, Scott Presler, founder of Early Vote Action. Now, we do have, and we will be talking about some of the data specifically in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania in 2024. And I don't want to, steal the thunder of Audit the Vote PA and Tony, but I do want to mention that there is a chart there that shows the increase in Republican registrations by presidential election cycle. So, Mr. Presler claimed, he made a lot of claims. He said, we registered 50,000 people. We delivered Pennsylvania. We're here on the ground. But the reality, if you look at the increase in Republican registrations by presidential cycle, they've been decreasing from 2015 to 2016, 2019 to 2020, 2023 to 2024. This is all evidenced and sourced with public data from pa.gov. Please do look on realscottpresler.com, and I'm sure that Tony from Audit the Vote will cover that in more detail. But basically, this disproves one of Scott Presler's claims that they're making all these registrations and it's making the difference, and that's really not what happened. We'll look at some other things there, but I just want to jump briefly to Wisconsin. I'm going to talk about Wisconsin and Pennsylvania together, because one of the things that Scott Presler posted very publicly on his X, he was talking about fraud or the lack of fraud. And what he said was, I stand by my comments. You are wrongfully telling people the election was rigged when it wasn't. You have no evidence that there was any wrongdoing in this election. So one question is, why is Scott Presler so committed to denying the existence of fraud? We just had, I believe it was Tulsi Gabbard, come out and mention, yes, there is machine fraud. We have documented evidence of it. We're going to do special investigations into this. Elon Musk mentioned in Wisconsin at a rally that over 2 million Social Security numbers were stolen, basically used by illegal immigrants. They did use them to register to vote. They did use them to vote. So clearly there is election fraud. So why is Mr. Presler saying that there's not? And of course, when anyone asks him on that or questions it, like a very large account MJ Truth Ultra was doing, and he provided screenshots very politely questioning him, Scott Presler blocked him. He denied it. He blocks anyone that questions him. It's a big problem. Anyways, let's go back a little bit to Pennsylvania. So when we're talking about Pennsylvania, there's a couple things. One was, the registrations, and specifically these claims about the Amish registrations. There was a lot of claims. That there's one that Scott Presler made on November 14th, 2024. It says, our Amish voter registration helped deliver Pennsylvania for Trump. But is that accurate? Are those claims true? So we look at that again on realscottpresler.com. There are reports of falsifying statistics, falsifying number of doors knocked, falsifying registration numbers. Mr. Presler famously claimed, 50,000 were registered, where his number 2 employee at Early Vote Action just 9 days prior to that claimed it was only 10,000 that were registered. So it's impossible, according to people on the ground, to register that many people in just 9 days. So what is happening there? Is that an inflation of those numbers? Is that what's happening in Pennsylvania? Let's see. So I want to go back a little bit. So Mr. Presler, when he launched his Early Vote Action PAC, he did a press release. I believe it was in 2023. What he says is this organization aims to build early/mail-in voting infrastructures in order to win the White House. But many election integrity experts point out the fraud that's inherent in mail-in voting and early voting. And I'll give an example out of Maricopa County, Arizona, famous for fraud. I'm from Arizona. In Arizona, Maricopa County, there was a large number of early voting and mail-in voting that happened for the first 28 days of voting season. And one of the problems is the data reveals that none of those signatures were rejected, 0, for signature verification during the first 28 days. That's about 1 million ballots. So this data has been verified by an organization here in Arizona that had access to the signature verification. So it looks like, possibly intentionally or maybe accidentally, no signature verification was done on any of those early voting or mail-in voting ballots in Maricopa County, Arizona. That's 1 million ballots. But then as soon as the early voting, after that 28th day, all of a sudden we saw rejections on signature verification, which was more in line with the normal number. So this is one indication of a level of fraud in early voting and mail-in voting. And you have to ask, how many of these illegal aliens that have social security numbers that are registered to vote and are voting, are they voting through mail-in voting, early voting? And is it even them voting? Is it just their ballots that are being voted? So that's a couple questions for Mr. Presler there. In Wisconsin, there was concerns from Cause of America reported 10% of all registrations were not living at the address they were registered in. And they pointed out a number that had moved out of the state permanently, that were registered to vote in the wrong county, that were registered to vote at a vacant address. Derek Evans pointed out nearly 5,000 illegal voter registrations in Milwaukee are on the voter rolls, and quoted, the city election commission refused to investigate them. Red Wave Press reported, again on Doge and Elon Musk, all of those 2 million illegal immigrants, and this is a quote from Antonio Gracias, they did vote. We found some by sampling that actually did vote, and we have referred them to prosecution at the Homeland Security Investigation Service. So why are Scott Presler and to a certain extent Turning Point and Charlie Kirk ignoring this proven fraud, this falsely claiming it doesn't exist, blaming everyone under the sun rather than their methods of ballot chasing, early voting, and mail-in voting, which, according to the results in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, do not work and do not win elections. Next, I'd like to go to, let's see, there's some more data on the Amish voting. So I'm jumping back to there. So Scott Presler mentioned, and this is all referenced on realscottpresler.com, that a post from Dr. Jan Halper, she said, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, we owe it to this man, at Scott Presler. He registered 180,000 Amish first-time voters. He worked tirelessly. Please send a thank you to Scott. And Scott Presler replied, thank you, Dr. Jan. We did it. My heart is exploding with happiness. My cup is full. So there's a problem with that, in that the state of Pennsylvania, according to multiple sources, has no more than 93,000 Amish. Of that 93,000, only 46,500 approximately are over 18 and eligible to vote. In the Amish population, a large percentage of the home is under 18 children. According to Young Center and the Discover Lancaster site, the total Amish population in Lancaster County and Chester County is at most 43,640, with 38,400 living in Lancaster County, and only about 11,000 to 17,000 eligible to vote. Grok also was cited that Presler claimed to register 180,000 Amish voters in Lancaster, but fact-checking shows this is likely inflated as the total population in Pennsylvania is far smaller, and typical Amish voting rates are less than 10%. So this is just another example of an inflated and false claim. Once he was called out on it, Scott Presler, to be fair, did say he revised it down. He said, "I love this, but in the spirit of being accurate, there are only 90,000 Amish statewide in Pennsylvania. We're registering a lot of Amish to vote, but I think this is a little generous." So, of course, he's correcting it way after the fact, after he has millions and millions of views. I believe that first post was viewed at least 9 million times. And then he doesn't give any accurate numbers. There's no data on how many he did register. So according to Lead Stories and Amy Gooley, a Pennsylvania Department State spokeswoman, these are all linked again on realscottpresler.com. It points out that the voter registration broken down by counties in a spreadsheet and posted on voting and election statistics through the Department of State and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania show that, according to this data, Republican voters in Lancaster increased by 10,546 between January 1st, 2024 and October 28th, 2024. Again, this seems to refute the claims that Mr. Presler registered a large number of Amish and that it made any significant difference in Pennsylvania, and specifically Lancaster County, which had previously voted red for Trump by a large margin. Really, there was no reason to even be in Lancaster County because it was so red and so pro-Trump. I will talk about those statistics right now. So in 2020, President Trump won 160,209 votes over Joe Biden, 115,847. That's a huge margin of victory. And in 2024, President Trump won with 166,261 votes compared to Kamala Harris, 120,119. So this is only an increase of 6,052 votes, specifically in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Both times Trump handily won, so there was no reason to even be there in Lancaster County in Pennsylvania. Let's see. So Scott Presler, he's also made a lot of claims about Republicans not turning out in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which is the reason that they lost. But again, the data shows that's not the case. Republicans did turn out, and what happened is a certain percentage of those Republican ballots voted Democrat. Now, there's been questions. Mr. Presler and Turning Point and Charlie Kirk, they love to register what they call low propensity Republican voters. These low propensity Republican voters are voters that are not likely to vote in the election, so they went out and registered them to vote. Well, it looks like, based on the data, if you're not even talking about fraud, you're not even talking about illegals voting, it looks like through their registration efforts, the result was a number of those low propensity voters voted Democrat, directly causing the loss. That's what a lot of people are questioning. That's what the data seems to support. We'll talk about that in more detail. Now, let's talk a little bit about the benefit to Mr. Presler in this. His PAC, Early Vote Action, has raised nearly $7 million. So on the backs of delivering these two losses, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, Mr. Presler's PAC has raised $7 million. Prior to that, Charlie Kirk and Turning Point pledged $5 million to Mr. Presler and ballot chasing initiatives. So I don't know exactly if that's additive. Turning Point has made some separate $60,000 donations to his PAC, but there's a lot of money and a lot of benefit. Liz Harrington of War Room said, "Something stinks in Pennsylvania. The 36th district has not had a Democrat state senator since it moved from Philadelphia to Lancaster County in 1979. Lancaster County went plus 16 for Trump just 4 months ago, and yet we're supposed to believe Republicans put the Democrat candidate over the top with mail-in votes, i.e. there were more mail-in votes for the Democrat candidate than Democrat voters who represented them." That's also referenced on realscottpresler.com. Presler was challenged by MJ Truth Ultra saying, This morning, I posted about real concerns all of us had regarding the Pennsylvania special elections that took place. I received an unfriendly message from Scott Presler demanding me to stop spreading, quote, misinformation. My concerns were: one, the vote tallies were within a 0.89% margin, suggesting an algorithm was used. Two, Democrats always start off with a 30% mail-in ballot lead. I appreciate Scott's work more than most, but I will not be silenced as a voter who has very real concerns that still exist that we can see with our own eyes. Why does Scott Presler not recognize that mail-in ballots and voting machines are still a problem? Even Donald Trump recognizes this and vocally demands we move away from voting machines to paper ballots and limit mail-in voting because it's ripe with fraud. Everyone should ask Scott why he ignores these issues. Does everyone feel like mail-in ballots and voting machines are not an issue anymore? Scott, please read the room. And shortly after that, Scott Presler blocked him on X, so preventing him from commenting on that. There's some other posts and comments in there, but I do want to talk about the mail breakdown of the 36th senatorial district. Again, Tony from Audit the Vote PA may cover this in more detail, but you can see for the Democrat, there was sent 8,536 ballots. Returned results for the Democrat were 8,869. For the Republican, sent was 5,451. And then the returned result for the Republican was 3,547. So this data seems to indicate that some of those Republican ballots were voted for the Democrat. It also shows that the Republicans did turn out in approximately the same rate that they do for off-season elections and special elections. All right, let's go back to Presler's PAC. So nearly $7 million in 2023 and 2024. Let's look into some of those donations. Again, this is on realscottpresler.com. Through Open Secrets, you can see screenshots. Anyone can query this. 2 donations from the Rockefeller family, donating at least $118,000 in 2024. And the question that came to everyone's mind was, how would Scott Presler end up in a room with the Rockefellers? Typically, with donations of this size, the donor would want an in-person meeting, maybe hand off the check in person. So did Scott Presler meet in person with the Rockefellers? How did he get these donations? And the Rockefellers, they are one of the wealthiest and most prominent families in America, but also one of the most infamous. And there's history of allegations of corruption, misuse of influence over global systems. This includes control of the Federal Reserve, global banking through Chase Manhattan Bank. This includes the creation of the U.S. Federal Reserve in 1913, implementing big pharma and medical industry domination. This was through the Rockefeller Foundation. Other New World Order through initiatives through the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, which was established by David Rockefeller. There's a lot of discussion and allegations of population control and funding of eugenics programs in the early 20th century and later global health initiatives, including vaccines and the COVID-19 vaccine through the Rockefeller Foundation. Further corruption of the education system to eliminate critical thinking and deliver compliant workers based on donations to the University of Chicago and the General Education Board. So some important questions. Since we're on financial topics, there's an article from Kartik Pratap. This is a CA Club India article that writes a lot of articles on net worth. According to Kartik, he estimates Scott Presler's annual income at $700,000. In the article, he also mentions that Mr. Presler inherited a free $550,000 home and has a net worth of $4 million. Also, we have a couple receipts showing that Mr. Presler received an over $100,000 free diesel Suburban in 2024. Allegedly, Mr. Presler owns a $320,000 apartment in downtown Pittsburgh and supposedly, allegedly, another home, which he's currently selling in Pennsylvania. So this is not really we brought this up in the beginning, this is not really a homeless dog walker. I mean, this is someone of means, and coming from a family of means. And speaking of family, Mr. Presler's father, Robert Presler, he was, you can see the screenshot again on realscottpresler.com. He was a director of information operations in the DASD. There's a screenshot which shows Scott Presler wishing a happy Father's Day to his father in the photo, and Robert Presler's LinkedIn. It shows he was worked for the United States Department of Defense, Director of Information Operations in the Pentagon, Director of Global Force Planning in the Pentagon, and then a Program Manager of Counterterrorism Training and Equipment. So why is that important? The reason it's important is because there's been several allegations that Scott Presler has been using either artificial intelligence bots or paid influencers or some type of government intelligence or other program for X platform manipulation, including reputation management. There's several screenshots there focusing on the phrase Scott Presler is a national treasure between February 7th and February 9th. This was posted many, many times in nearly identical phrases, something that's been seen before through identical propaganda bots. For example, Kamala Harris or pro-Ukraine or pro-Russia messages. And then some of these are from influencers, but think of Snap Soda, where right-wing influencers were paid to question, wait a minute, why are we preventing people on government assistance from buying sugary soda? Well, it was revealed that they were paid by the pro-soda lobbyists to say that. So these messages that appear, they seem to be created potentially by bots or paid influencers. It could be through either Turning Point Action or his Early Vote Action app. And just a note there, both of those apps were created by a company named Superfeed Technologies Incorporated, which was created by Turning Point. Turning Point Chief Operating Officer Tyler Boyer is currently the chairman of the board and the CEO. So there's some really strong ties there. So some good questions. But you see in these 9 pages of screenshots, almost this identical phrase, Scott Presler is a national treasure. Scott Presler is a national treasure. These were all posted in response to criticism of Scott Presler that he should be, quote unquote, kicked out of the MAGA movement. So these do not seem very authentic, but we're going to cover a little bit more why. So Emerald Robinson posted a tweet September 26, 2024, and what she says is, behold, the entire fan base of Scott Presler is in the comment section of my tweets day and night. Look at all these DOD spooks screaming vote early. Really makes you think. So there's several influencers and several reporters that have noticed there seems to be some authentic or potentially platform manipulation going on, potentially around reputation management. There's some other information about Grok and how that's used, but we've seen this before used with Turning Point. So in a recent AZ GOP chairman election, again led by Chief Operating Officer Tyler Boyer, there was screenshotted evidence of a coordinated smear campaign in an attempt to influence the election. It was the same message posted over and over, all by paid Turning Point employees that had the Turning Point symbol in their profile. All those screenshots are there in realscottpresler.com. All right, so let's tie this together. Scott Presler's father mentioned in an intelligence DOD report on influencing political outcomes these very tactics. Mr. Presler, Robert Presler, actually sponsored the report, and he's thanked in the acknowledgement of the report. It's called Improving C2 and Situational Awareness for Operations in and Through the Information Environment. It's a 100-page report. The acknowledgements say, we wish to thank our various points of contact and interlocutors in the sponsoring office, Rob Presler. Now, there's some very interesting excerpts. I'll read just a few of them. Again, this is on influencing political outcomes through social media and technology. The report talks about a lot of things, including mimetic warfare. What is mimetic warfare? From the report, from a definition, it's a form of modern information warfare and psychological warfare that involves the propagation of memes on social media to influence public opinion. Yes, using memes in psychological warfare to influence public opinion. On page 32 of the report, it mentions memetic warfare. On page 14 of the report, it mentions, I'll read this quote, when a post by a user has been met with an inundation of flaming by other users, the initial user may be hesitant or suppressed to post again while expressing similar views. So what does this mean? It means exactly what happened to Emerald Robinson. If she posts criticism of Scott Presler, these bots or micro-influencers come in and with this flaming technique, they try to discourage her from posting that again, usually through gaslighting, saying, oh, you're an idiot, you're stupid, Scott Presler's a national treasure. That's what the evidence shows. On page 88, there's another quote which says, additionally, social media platforms were infiltrated by foreign bots and automated retweets. An analysis that fails to account for these facts would have a negative value. It would mislead instead of inform. And this is the last quote I'll read. On page 97 to 98 of this report commissioned by Robert Presler for the Department of Defense, it says, the utility of using automation can be seen in Russian factories of people overseeing propaganda and trolling bots, running many accounts that are near identical or use slight variations on the same message, perhaps via automated rephrasing. The sheer volume of content posted on social media sites is possible only via automation with reactions and responses to the post controlled manually. These are near MAGAMind processes, and they suggest how hard it would be to distinguish sophisticated, fully automated propaganda from human-generated propaganda. All right, I've covered a couple things. There's a couple other information that it's on the website, realscottpresler.com, but I do want to go to some of the other speakers. I'm going to turn it over very shortly to Mark Cook from the Hand Count Roadshow. Before I do that, Mark, I just want to re-emphasize the rules for the speakers. We're not going to focus on personal attacks. We're not going to focus on personal life choices. We're going to focus on the data and disproving any false narratives that Mr. Presler may be putting out there. So with that, Mark, do you want to unmute your mic and start speaking?
Sure, more than happy to.
Thank you. And give a brief introduction. Give a brief introduction to yourself, Mark. Sorry.
No problem. All right. So, yeah, Hand Count Roadshow actually showed up after all of this stuff. So I'm an IT guy from Colorado, and I got involved in the 2020 election because of Scott Presler. So I'm going to take you through the story of my experience so everyone can understand everything through my eyes and what I saw. And I was also duped by him early on. And so I met Scott first, I think it was a year or two before the 2020 election, and it was out in Washington, D.C. at the Trump Hotel. In the basement of the hotel, there was an event with Dinesh D'Souza, and Scott was there, Will Witt was there. I knew who Will Witt was because I was watching him on YouTube for some time before that. And so I got to talk to him. I saw this tall, skinny guy, which happened to be Scott Presler, but I didn't really make the connection of who he was. And then, let's see here. That's where I first met him, shook his hand. That's it. Then I saw these riots happen, BLM and Antifa stuff went on, and all of a sudden, Scott Presler is out there cleaning up the streets and filling up trash cans, really cool activist that is helping fix our cities, which I thought was really neat. And then we'll fast forward, 2020 election. Okay, so now I watched the election night over in Tampa, Florida with American Prairie Festival people. And November 4th, it was Twilight Zone for me and probably for a whole lot of the country. And I'm getting ready to head back to Colorado after a crazy election night, stop counting and all that fun stuff. And on the plane, and I looked down at my phone, literally walking on the plane to get on it. And I looked down at my phone, and I see a Facebook post from Scott Presler saying, heading to Pennsylvania or going to Pennsylvania, need help. And I was raring to go at this point because of what had just happened. I really truly believe that our election may have been manipulated at that point. The results did not match everything that I had seen and expected. And so I wanted to do something about it, get to the bottom of it, bring attention to it and settle it. And I saw that. And I'm like, all right, I want to go do something. This guy, Scott Presler, knows how to get stuff done. I'm going to reach out and offer to help. But I didn't have a way to get a hold of him because I never had his phone. So I reached out to someone that I watched the election with the night before, and I asked if she could find Scott's number for me. And about 30 seconds later, I get a text message, and it's Scott's phone number. So I called the number, and I was shocked that a guy answered, and it was Scott. So I said, hey, Scott, my name's Mark. I met you years ago. You won't remember me, but I saw your message that you're going to Pennsylvania and that you need help. I'm getting on a plane, about to go back to Colorado, but I'm already kind of on the East Coast anyway. Do you want my help in Pennsylvania? And he said, yes, I would love it, because he was driving his van to Pennsylvania at that moment. So I said, okay, enough said. I will reroute and I will go to Pennsylvania instead. So I said, I'll call you right back. I turned around, got back off the plane, told him I had a family emergency, and called Scott. Said, okay, what's going on? What are we doing? And that's when he came up with Stop the Steal rally that he wanted to do on the Capitol steps in Pennsylvania. So I said, okay, I'm totally in. How can I help? I said, yeah, you have signs. We have the bullhorn. Like you said, I've seen rallies before. You got to have the bullhorn and the signs. And it didn't have signs made. And I thought, okay, well, I can get some signs made. I'm sitting here. I can't get a flight out until the morning. So I will work on getting signs made. So I reached out all over Facebook to try to find people that were in Pennsylvania. I found a couple moms that were there, and we worked together to create very simple Stop the Steal sign, literally red writing on white background. And if you look at the Stop the Steal picture, so use your favorite search engine, look for Stop the Steal rally in Pennsylvania 2020, November 4th, you will see all those signs. There's the white sign with the red Stop the Steal with the blue club, right? So I worked with a mom. We had it printed like a Kinko's or an Office Max. And then another mom went to Home Depot and got moving boxes and box cutters, tape, and glue. And we all met when my flight landed. I Ubered right to the Capitol steps. The moms showed up, and myself and those two moms and all their little kids, we all sat there together assembling the first Stop the Steal signs for that rally. And Scott showed up sometime later. I remember where he was parked on the street, just a little bit past the steps of the Capitol with his van. And when I looked down, he had already got the back of the van open. He had a van full of stuff, table and some other things. So we went down and helped him carry everything up. And you can see the pictures. I'm even in some of the Stop the Steal pictures. And you can see my backpack underneath the table. So I was absolutely there. And it was kind of a pretty neat event, bringing attention to all this. And I have all my text messages also from Scott starting November 4th at 2:10 p.m. And I've got all of going through all the way to current. And the whole time that we were there, the Thursday, October 5th, let's see, Harrisburg Capitol building, I don't know exactly what that was about. Some nice citizens went to Scott and said, hey, we'll get you guys a hotel room because we didn't have a place to stay. And so I was very happy about that. And so I ended up sharing a hotel room with Scott. I think it was for 2 days. And, literally 2 beds, shared the bathroom. And the first night that we were there, I was just raring to go, and I was so upset that the public seemed to kind of be in the dark on all this. So I really wanted to get something done. So I started a website called GreatAmericanRebirth.com. So if you go to GreatAmericanRebirth.com, you will see the website that I set up. Literally, Scott was sleeping in the bed right behind me, and I was right in front of the bed at the little desk that was there in the hotel room. And I stayed up all night building that site, just trying to stand it up quickly. So I had a place to put real news that I was getting directly with my own eyes and my camera, so I could share it with the public. And so that's why, if you look at that site now, it's not the most beautiful site. I literally did it in the middle of the night. And it hasn't been updated really since then. But I did end up using it for an audit that I was about to do in Sacramento County, California, at their elections department. So if you'll see on the menu, there's a Sacramento County, California button. If you click on that, it'll take you through all of that in the December 2020 aftermath that I was involved in. And I have been heavily involved on the inside of all this election stuff, more so than probably anyone would believe, but this has been my life. It's absolutely been insane. So after a couple of days of doing the rally, we did the front steps. I think we did the back steps for a day or two. It was pretty crazy. Lots of media there. Yeah, I'm doing Scott. I just kind of stayed in the background because I'm not a foreground kind of guy. I remember BLM and Antifa were there dressed in all black. And I actually put my backpack down. I told Scott at one point, I'm going to go talk to them. He told me, don't go talk to them. They're going to get the, what kicked out of you. And I said, no, I'm not really worried about that. So I set my backpack down. I walked right across the street and I started talking to them. And of course, they were starting to surround me. And then eventually, after about 30 minutes, we found common ground. And in fact, one of them even came over and gave me a hug after this 30-minute talk. Her name was Vera, and she's a pastor at a local church, and asked if I would come speak at her church. And yes, that was like a BLM Antifa person asking me to speak at their church. So turns out you can get through eventually to some of your fellow citizens if you're willing to talk to them. So I did the rally with Scott there. Then some citizens said, hey, come stay at our house. So after a couple days in the hotel, they invited Scott and I to stay at their house around town there. So I ended up riding with Scott. Also, I think it was the first day or the second day at the Capitol. I ended up having dinner with Scott and his parents. So we went to this little bar pub that was kind of nearby, just down the street from the Capitol. And I had dinner with his mom and his dad and Scott and me. It was all four of us. So that was interesting. And of course, didn't mention what his father did for a living or anything like that. That would have been nice to know. And at one point, let's see here, Scott got a call. I'm just looking through my notes here. He got a call and said something about some ballots that were in a dumpster somewhere at a school. So he's like, do you want to go hunt for ballots? I was like, absolutely, let's go. So hopped in the car with him, and we drove to this school. We parked down the street from the school because we were trying to be super secret, and parked there. We walked down into the school. I don't know if we hopped the fence or what, but we're all set in the back of this school and where all the dumpsters are. And these are big dumpsters with those sliding doors on them. And so we're opening the doors up, and Scott and I are both jumping into the dumpsters, going through all the trash in these dumpsters, looking for shredded ballots. And we ended up finding a couple bags with some shredded paper in them. And we picked up those bags and put them in the back of Scott's van. And we were going to go through them, but Scott said he would go through them later. And so we just got in the van and took off again. So we ended up staying at the other people's house for, I think, a day or two. And then I had to get back to Colorado. So Scott dropped me off. I believe it was a train station or near the airport. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he dropped me off at somewhere, and then I jumped on a flight and went back to Colorado. I texted him and said, hey, I want to help. What are we doing next? And he said, well, we're going to do Georgia, Stop the Steal rally next week. And I said, okay, I'm in. I'll be there. So I think it was only in Colorado for a day or two. I flew back out to Georgia to do that Stop the Steal rally. I met him on that first day, and he kind of had everything set up at that point. He didn't need any help. And there were so many other people now involved. It was a huge rally. It wasn't just Scott. It was a bunch of people that were involved in that. And then I got that call that night to go help in D.C. to help Nate Keynes with trying to figure out what happened with the election. And so I knew his father, Dennis Keynes, Nate Keynes, the FBI whistleblower for Uranium One. I had met Dennis at an AmpFest event years ago where Nate spoke, and Dennis called me that night and asked me if I'd go help Nate out in D.C. So I left the first night of the Georgia rally, got to the airport, went to D.C., and then I was in D.C. for a while. So I don't need to go into that part of the story. if you want to see my whole story there, go to handcountroadshow.org and watch one of my presentations, and I go through that whole ordeal there. But back to Scott. So let's see here. Then Scott, we kind of disconnected a little bit. I'd sent him text messages. I wasn't hearing much back from him. And I was really focused on what the heck's going on with our electronic voting systems and trying to map out the entire ecosystem of our elections to identify where all of the potential abuse vectors are for this whole thing. So at that point, I started seeing Scott pushing early voting and mail voting. Now, I had known by now, and this is, I think, around 2021-ish, that mail-in voting and early voting are the number one way to commit massive fraud in an election system. So I mapped the whole thing out. I saw it very clearly around, I think it was May of 21 is when I finally figured out what the heck they are doing to manipulate elections all over. And there's many different ways, but that was the biggest way. And that's why we had COVID, to force, of course, mail-in voting everywhere and drop boxes, because you are able to get unsolicited ballots in there. And so everyone needs to understand this is really critical. When a mail-in ballot or drop box ballot or absentee ballot, they're all the same thing. When they show up, and regardless of the information on the front of the envelope, regardless of the signature, let's just say the signature does match, okay? When you open that envelope up and you pull the ballot out of the envelope, there is no way to know who filled that ballot out. No one knows who filled the ballot out when it arrives in an envelope. And that is a massive problem, because what good does the signature do if you have no way to know who filled the ballot out in the first place? And Wayne Williams, the previous Secretary of State of Colorado, when I asked him several months ago in person at an event in Denver, Colorado, I said, Wayne, you're the previous Secretary of State. You're the one that brought Dominion in to all of Colorado. Tell me, please, when you have a mail-in ballot, and he also, by the way, Wayne Williams works for Runbeck Election Services, who makes the Agilis machine that actually does the quote-unquote signature verification for many states. I mean, it's just the most absurd thing anyway. But I asked Wayne, and he said, yeah, you have no way to know who actually filled out a mail ballot when it comes in. And so he admitted that, which is crazy. So I want everyone to take note of that. You don't know who filled the darn things out. So they are totally insecure. So I see Scott pushing early voting and mail-in voting. And early voting is showing your hands early. They gather the data early on, so they know exactly what adjustments they need to make to the election. Then they use the mail-in ballots to stuff them in. And then they use the voter registration entries to justify the ballots that they stuff into the system, because you can't really have ballots coming in if you don't have corresponding voter registration entries. So I'm seeing all this, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Scott, you are actually setting us up for failure by pushing early and mail-in voting. So I kept trying to reach him. He would not call me back, wouldn't respond to my text messages. And then I had a great thing. I was in Arizona, in Maricopa County. I was in a church, and it was during an AZ GOP event. And I'm sitting there in the restroom. I'm at the urinal. I finish my business. I turn around, and Scott Presler is standing there in the bathroom in the corner, blow drying his hair. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is my opportunity. I can actually get to talk to him. Finally, he can't avoid me because we're in the freaking bathroom together. So he finishes doing his hair, and he starts to walk out. I said, hey, Scott. And he looks at me and goes, hey, Mark. So he remembered my name, exactly who I was. And I said, all right, we have to talk about this early voting deal. And he looked at me and kind of pointed down. He's super tall, and I'm 5'6". So he points down at me and says, Mark, I've heard the same thing from every expert, even Professor David Clements. I'm not going to stop, or I don't care, I'm not going to stop, or something like that. And then just walks off. And I'm sitting there going, what the heck was that? Now, here's what the really strange thing was. When he was talking to me, he had a super strange voice. It was incredibly flamboyant, like forced flamboyant, and really thick accent. Some type of like Southern accent, very flamboyant type of voice. It was not his normal voice. And if someone had just started with that for a couple of seconds, I had figured they'd be joking. But the entire time I talked to him, it was that same super weird voice. It was the most bizarre thing I'd ever experienced. So after he left there, I was talking to a friend of mine sometime later, and they said, yeah, I went up to Scott and asked him in Nevada about early voting and how dangerous it was. And Scott told me, and that's not me, this is what a person was telling me Scott told him, was that he said, quote, I can't stop, Harmeet will kill me. And I'm guessing he was talking about Harmeet Dillon. And it wasn't not like an actual threat to his life, but I think he was just figuratively saying Harmeet would kill him. So I don't know how Harmeet is sitting there somehow influencing or controlling Scott Presler, but I would say it's worth maybe a look into that as well. It's been very frustrating. So I've been trying to congratulate Scott for at least getting people involved in elections, but trying to subtly let people know if you register but you don't vote, that could be really dangerous because low propensity voters are the second or third records in line for the fraudsters to use to justify the ballots they're stuffing into the system in the first place. So really bad idea. And even worse is that if people are registered to vote and they're registered as Republicans, but they actually vote Democrat, because that's of course possible. And what a great cover to go out to all these states. And if you look at the states he's listed, it's the states that we're having major problems in now. If you go out and you have the cover of registering voters, can you imagine the damage you could do by registering certain types of voters that will vote differently than normal Republicans would vote, or register people with low propensity voting histories who then aren't actually going to turn out and vote? But it gives you the cover to then justify a whole bunch of ballots to offset the actual votes. And what I started to put together in my head was, ooh, this does not look good, because if he's actually not on our side, he's doing a great job at setting us all up to be totally conned.
Hey, Mark, can I interject real quick? So, Tony Shoup from Audit the Vote PA does have to go shortly, but what you just made was an excellent point, but it tees up her data perfectly. So what I'd like to do is switch to Tony, because she has to drop off shortly. I'd like Tony to cover some of her data, which you just teed up perfectly. You made some excellent points there, Mark, and then we'll come back to you. Is that okay, Mark?
No problem.
All right. Thank you. So Tony, I think you have to unmute yourself. Are you there?
I'm here. I just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay.
Yes.
I'm having tech issues.
Okay.
Everything clear?
Yes, we hear you fine and clear. I know you have to go shortly, so please do cover whatever you'd like on the data out of Pennsylvania. Anything else? Thank you.
Yep, will do. So to Mark's point that he just finished speaking about, we have been tracking data on the ground since right after the 2020 election, and have kind of suspected this low propensity phenomenon, Mark, that you alluded to, where are the low propensity Republicans who actually vote even voting for the Republican candidate? And we kind of come to a conclusion just from the data side based on this Lancaster race, because you can see the numbers, and I even put the graph in the comments that has been shared. It's on the website. Like Brian mentioned, it's all over the internet. I did a video explaining exactly what the graph is, so that as you're sharing it with people, you understand.
Oh, Tony, we just lost your audio, unless it's just me.
How's that?
Yeah.
Can't hear her either. There she.
Are you back?
Yeah, you're back. Keep going.
Okay, apparently I have to figure out how to leave my phone on, because I'm on my phone, and when it goes to the screensaver, it cuts out. Okay, maybe I'll just stick my finger in it. Don't do that. Stop me again if you don't hear me. So again, going back to just the data, the Lancaster graph that I'm going to talk about does not indicate that there was fraud in any way. It shows us, however, what's going on with mail ballots when they are returned by Democrats and Republicans. And that's the alarming piece now, is that the party in our state, specifically Pennsylvania, nationwide, is pushing that early voting and chasing mail ballots for low propensity voters is how we win elections. However, what we just saw in our Senate District 36, that Brian did a great job explaining should have been a landslide election, is that the Republicans who returned mail ballots are not voting for the Republican candidate because the Democrat candidate got more mail-in votes than ballots that were returned. And the third-party votes are also on that graph. And so this is the first time we've had a small race that we can kind of see this going on. But this is also a trend that we've been tracking since 2020. And this is, I'm by no means indicating that 2020 was a fair election. In fact, I think Pennsylvania was absolutely a stolen election. And it's been alarming to me that Scott Presler would not admit that openly. A little bit of backstory from us is that we started a petition for a full forensic audit, me and two other moms, in which, Mark, funny enough, we were not one of the moms that were with you and Stop the Steal in Pennsylvania, because I was still just wide-eyed and innocent and hoping the courts would shake everything out. We wouldn't end up with an illegitimate president, which we did. And so we started a petition in February of 2021 for a full forensic audit of the 2020 election. We started pounding the pavement and getting some support. And right around the springtime, we crossed over about 10,000, 15,000 signatures. Someone mentioned we needed to connect with this guy named Scott Presler. Now, I was not politically active before 2020, so I had never heard of him, didn't know who he was. My co-founder, her name is Karen Taylor. You can follow her on X as well and ask her to for her version of this. But she spoke to Scott directly because she reached out to him and asked for support for the audit that we were pushing for in Pennsylvania. And he responded to her by saying he would not interest looking back. He did not want to audit anything. He just wanted to register voters and move forward. And at the time, we thought it was a little bit strange because we were kind of in shell shock on the ground here in Pennsylvania, kind of wondering, did we really just inaugurate an illegal president? Like, what just happened? Most of the patriots on the ground were not interested in moving forward. And the only people we found that were was establishment Uni Party folks. But again, at the time, I didn't think much of it. I thought, well, all right, he's going to register voters. We need to register voters. In no way does our organization say that voter registration is not important, and growing our base that way is invaluable. So we just continued with our efforts. We got 120,000 signatures on our petition by the summer. It's been a crazy whirlwind. I was blessed to have dinner actually with President Trump with my team of about 15 other people in Bedminster, New Jersey, to talk about what happened in 2020 and our efforts and see if there was something we could do to remedy it. And so that's kind of what catapulted me into this space, and that a lot of you maybe know who I am at this point because of that. And we stayed on the ground and continued to investigate, and we're turning into more of a watchdog organization that looks at the data and evaluates what happens every election cycle and just puts out the publicly available data and the analysis that we have found. And another thing to Mark's point, I'll wrap up here because I was on the road all week traveling across the state of Pennsylvania. I just did a four city tour. I hit every corner of the state, and my birthday was yesterday. My family, I have 3 daughters and a husband, and they're nagging me to spend time with them tonight. So I promised them that I would only be on this space for a little bit. But we did a mail-in ballot analysis after the 2024 election because we wanted to see if that was actually what put President Trump over the top in Pennsylvania. Is that really how he won? And what we've discovered, all these reports are publicly available. We did press releases. It's all on our website, auditthevotepa.com, and I can share links to it. The report shows that 40% of the mail ballots from the 2024 election were for Republicans. 40% of the Republicans who returned a mail-in ballot actually voted in person in 2020. So that's kind of a stark contrast in that, well, the ballots is the mail ballot. We chased low propensity voters, and that's what put us over the top. Well, not really. You basically just converted almost half of the people that voted in person in 2020, indicating they were highly likely to vote in person again. You just converted them to the mail ballot. And there's a lot more analysis that goes along with that. But my concern with what Scott is looking at is he's only looking at the surface level of numbers the State Department is putting out. He's not asking some of the tougher questions, and we've tried to ask some questions very respectfully on his platform. I met him in person at the second Butler rally when President Trump came back to Butler after the horrific shooting on the 13th, shook his hand. I've been on the phone with him. I don't have nearly the background that Mark described he has with him, but I have met him. I have been on the phone with him. I do have his early vote app. I tried using it a little bit, and even with some of my volunteers out here to see if we could utilize it. And I was really just trying to ask him some questions on his Twitter and raise awareness about my concerns based on the data that we're finding through early voting and the mail ballots. And right after the Wisconsin loss, he blocked us. And so that to me is a little bit concerning. If you're not willing to answer questions about the work that you're doing, I'm not okay with that. We're very open at Audit the Vote PA. We want our work scrutinized and questions, and we'll answer anything. I would only block somebody if they were starting to throw profanities or be disrespectful, and we were never that way. So that's a little concerning. But back to the trends of the low propensity voters. We saw in 2020 President Trump's numbers, which again are probably not accurate anyway, which our canvassing effort proved statewide, 12 county canvassing effort working outdoors, and this is also all documented very well on our website, auditthevotepA.com, is that the Republicans who returned ballots in 2020 didn't all vote for Donald Trump. And we also saw that exact same trend in the gubernatorial race with Senator Doug Mastriano running against the then Attorney General Josh Shapiro, is that Republicans who returned mail ballots didn't all vote for the Republican candidate, Doug Mastriano. Exact same thing with Oz Fetterman. And so we spoke to folks in nursing homes that were registered Republicans and asked them what their, just to get their feedback after the election. And one of the things we found really interesting was some of the registered Republicans in nursing homes communicated to us that they just could not bring themselves to vote for Dr. Oz because he was hurting puppies. He was killing puppies. And in Pennsylvania, folks remember the Fetterman campaign putting out a very strong ad to that effect, but it was a lie, and he had to later apologize. But unfortunately, because of early voting and mail ballots, which technically Pennsylvania doesn't have early voting, that's another topic, we have mail ballots. You can go to your election office before election day and request a mail ballot. That's what ends up happening. That's how you end up voting. It's not technically early voting. But what we found is that they were hyper-focused and targeted with propaganda and ads. They were just flooded with this propagandized message from the Fetterman campaign that Oz was hurting puppies. And lo and behold, then they ended up not voting for Dr. Oz. They voted for Fetterman. And I will admit, I was no huge fan of Dr. Oz myself. But I held my nose and voted for him anyway. And so that kind of just tells us that what we kind of are concluding is one of the possibilities of what's going on is that the USAID money that Elon has exposed how dirty that is becoming and how it's funding organizations like Act Blue and a bunch of left-wing NGOs, is those guys are now able to tell based on who requests mail ballots, they can figure out who the low propensity voters are, and they can hyper-target their funds to those specific people because low propensity voters are easier to flip. They're less informed. They're not paying attention to politics the way that those probably listening on this space are. And so when they're getting hyper targeted with a bunch of ads trying to say don't vote for the candidate registered under, they're much easier to flip. And so in the most benign sense, if we're not stuffing ballots and we don't have, to Presler's credit, he is right in that Pennsylvania, we don't have proof of fraud because in order to prove fraud, you have to have intent, malicious intent. You have to have a lot of eyewitness testimony, or at least 2 eyewitness testimonies. And we don't have that, but we have some very concerning data that points to the fact that his tactic of chasing ballots with low propensity voters is actually working against us. And that's probably one of the more concerning pieces to all of this. And it's right in the data. It's proven right in the data. I'll cover one more piece and then I'll give it back to you, Brian. And I could probably wanted to ask questions. I wanted to hear for questions, but I don't know that I'm going to do it. We'll have to do another space. Is that early voting? We just learned this in 2024. I alluded to this. Pennsylvania doesn't have early voting. So first of all, our laws are such that you can vote up to 50 days before election day, but we've also found in many cases the ballots aren't even printed and ready yet. And so let's say it's 40 days before election day, or whenever your election office does have available ballots, when you go there, you're essentially filling out an application for a mail ballot. which is then getting you on this list that these left-wing NGOs can now purchase from whatever entity, and they can identify you as somebody who has requested a ballot. And then they can figure out if you're low propensity and target you in the future, which is kind of the danger of pushing this whole idea. But you fill out an application, it gets processed at the counter right then and there, which takes time. And then they hand you the equivalent of a mail ballot. You fill it out, you put it in an envelope, just like you would at home. The only difference is you're not putting a stamp on it and sticking it in the mailbox. You're leaving it at your election office. So we could argue that it's a little bit safer because, at least like Mark mentioned, we know that the person filled out the ballot. You saw them there. So that's a little bit safer. But the thing that caught a lot of people off guard in Pennsylvania is we have a mail ballot request deadline. So 7 days typically before the election, you can no longer request a mail ballot. They do that for chain of custody and to try to keep it quote unquote secure, the mail voting. And so a lot of people tried to go vote right before the election and were told they couldn't, and they refused. Wait, I thought I could early vote. Well, no, because your early voting was actually requesting mail ballots. And since you didn't make the deadline for the mail ballot, they were not able to vote. And that caused a ton of confusion and chaos on the ground, specifically in Bucks County. You guys will probably remember that went out to Bucks when there was just a whole hoopla of mess out there over the early voting, turning people away, having to stay open later. And I just think that his early voting message just caused a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. And we just want honest elections at Audit the Vote. You know, we are open. We hope that, Scott, a lot of the conclusions that are being drawn now based on all of this info coming to light, I'm an optimist by nature, and I'm kind of still just hoping that that stuff is not true and that we can have an honest, open, civil conversation with him, get to the bottom of this, come together at the end of the day, get a game plan moving forward that pushes honest voter registration, but also what's best for election integrity at the same time. And that's kind of the whole reason I agreed to come on this space. I just want to raise awareness, hoping we can have a conversation with him, and that this isn't a nefarious thing that we're getting into here, but there's an awful lot of evidence that points to the contrary. So Brian, with that, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. And just before I go to the next speaker, I do want to remind everyone, please do share this space. Please post and repost it and share it. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to David Gordon, the founder and director of Virginia Project and Political Action Committee. I think he only has about 10 minutes or 10 or 20 minutes, I believe he said. And then I see that Joe Oltman is added. I'd like to go to him next. And then I do want to go to some of our other speakers, like Zach is on here. I definitely want to get you in there. And then please do request the mic a couple other people. So, but first I want to go to David Gordon, the founder and director of Virginia Project. David, say hello. And remember, we're sticking just to the data and no personal attacks. And so let's go. Let's keep it going like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Please excuse me, everybody. I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm the founder and director of the Virginia Project, which is a Republican political action committee. Just to give you some background, it is not your typical political action committee. It wouldn't have been organized in that way at all, except that I needed to do so in order to legally coordinate with Republican Party organizations and committees. What the Virginia Project is, well, I have to say was now, since I closed in January. It was essentially a support organization intended to stoke the rebuilding of a almost defunct Republican Party of Virginia in the wake of the 2019 elections. When I was kind of out of politics at the time, I'm a computer programmer, I'm not really a political animal. And I'd heard the news that the Democrats had, for the first time in a generation, swept the elections and had a trifecta in Virginia. And having lived under trifecta Democrat governments before, I knew the nightmare that was about to come, and the people of Virginia really didn't know what was going to happen, but I did. So I felt a compulsion to intervene, and thus I created the Virginia Project in order to try and get the Republican Party back on its feet, and get it competitive again, give it a winning vision, some unified purpose, and to try and generate ideas and methods to put it back on the success path. It wasn't entirely voluntary on their part, but I didn't really give them a choice. I essentially created an informal innovation auxiliary unit, attached it to the party in a way that they couldn't get rid of it. Okay, so when I was first deciding what to do, the first thing I did was an analysis of, how did they get there? And one of the first things to come out was that they left dozens and dozens of seats in the legislature unchallenged. So the Democrats didn't even have to fight in order to get a quarter plus of the legislature. They just got it for free. So for the Democrats, they had a very easy game. They had to fight to win less than a quarter of the seats in the legislature in order to control it. So one of the initial objectives of the Virginia project was to recruit a candidate for every single seat in the House of Delegates. Okay, and I established this objective just 5 days after I had started. It was just such a clear failure of the basic mechanics of a party. You got to put a candidate on the ballot or your chances of winning will always be zero. So let's increase those chances above zero, even if it's just a little bit, to give us some better odds. You do that across dozens and dozens of seats, and you
David, let me interject. Sorry, David. Let me just interject. I do want to just encourage you to be on topic a little bit sooner. I know you're giving some good background, and thank you for doing that. But I'd encourage you to, let's focus on Scott a little bit quicker with some of the background, if you could, please. Thank you.
Okay, certainly. Well, this background is very relevant because the point of this background is to give you an idea of just how deep the ownership of this particular objective was. This was the main reason why Virginia Project existed. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward to shorten the story a bit. Come February 2021, I discovered that another group that had picked up that objective from us and was going to run with it didn't, and that we had to scramble fast in order to meet that objective. So we did, and we started a hard campaign, very relentless, and one of my staff members ran into Scott Presler at an event in Northern Virginia and obtained his business card and suggested that I call him for help with this specific project. Okay, that's why the background is relevant here. Okay, so I called him. The first thing I asked him was whether he was willing to run for one of the seats in Virginia Beach where we needed a nominee and didn't have one. He gave me a flat no. No explanation, just no. It's like, okay. Then I asked him, would you be willing to help us recruit candidates, so that we can run in every district? I got another flat no. So finally, I asked, would you be willing to help out the local Republican committee, the Republican Party of Virginia Beach? And again, he says no. I ask why not, and he tells me that Virginia is hopeless and not worth his time. So I'm like, all right, well, nothing for me here. Thank you for your time. I'll, move on, get it done. So we did crowdsource. Excuse me a second.
You got one? Yeah, go ahead.
I have an elderly cat. We crowdsourced, through the committees, through the auxiliaries, through activists. We did this massive search all over the state to fill dozens of nominations. And finally, after months and months of hard work, we did. And this was an all-time record. It had never happened before in the history of Virginia politics. This was a big deal, and it was fulfillment of one of the main reasons why our organization existed in the first place. So, we print the news, we're all in celebration. Within 24 hours, Scott Presler posts, "I have great news," and then tells the story about 100 House of Delegates candidates being recruited, with all attribution as to who did it completely stripped out. So this was presented to his audience in such a fashion as to lead them to believe that he was the one who was responsible for it. So I see his post, and there's hundreds and hundreds of "Thank you, Scott Presler, you're a hero," etc., etc. And everybody who was involved, everybody who witnessed what was going on, they were all telling him, "Hey, this was Virginia Project. This was the local grassroots who did it. You should credit them." And he obstinately refused to give any acknowledgement whatsoever. So, long story short, this was owned by us as much as possible, and within a day of achieving a major objective, making history, Scott Presler led his entire million-plus strong audience to believe that it was Scott Presler. So, the upshot of this story is that ever since, I've noticed that he has this pattern and practice of announcing accomplishments that have been done by other people, but announcing them in a way that strips the attribution, strips the credit from the people who did the work, and allows his audience to believe that he is to credit for that accomplishment. And over time, I realized that his entire reputation is essentially built on that pattern and practice of misrepresentation.
Excellent points, David. That was really good points that you made at the end there, and I really thank you. That's a very important story, so thank you for sharing that. If you have anything else, we'll come back to you. I do want to go to we're going to go Joe Altman, and then Zach, and then Emon. Don't be mad at me. I'm sorry about that. But Joe, let's keep it clean, buddy. You know I love you. Let's keep it clean. Joe Altman, if you want to unmute.
Am I not normally clean? I'm just trying to be sure. We're clear here.
You're clean, but no personal attacks. All right, go ahead.
We love you.
So let me just. So I like to get to the meat of things, and I think one of the reasons why people get you get caught up in justifying or trying to justify the ridiculous. You look at Scott Presler, it's probably already been said. You look at Scott Presler, what Scott Presler's dad did, and I spoke with Dave Clements at an event in Virginia with a bunch of great people there, and they were talking about how Rob Presler came out of nowhere and caused chaos every time he touched something. And so we find ourselves in this place where we try to figure out, is this just a good person? Is it a bad person? Are they just hard to get along with? Are they not hard to get along with? Do they like chaos? Because some people are just filled with drama. And over the last 4 years, we've seen a pattern kind of get created. What you said about Scott Presler, I don't know who it was, but I do follow you. TVP, a Virginia Project, about the fact that Scott would step in and he would just take credit for everything. He would say that if something happened that was good, he would take credit for it. If it wasn't, he was quick to point out that the people didn't vote hard enough. They didn't do. So that same type of mentality has been going on for the last couple of decades. But that same sort of mentality, that same sort of game plan has been used by other people. And Brian, you're probably referring to me not saying anything about your boy Jovan Pulitzer, but I'm just going to have to say it. The same thing keeps happening. We keep having people come up that say, no, I figured it out. It's all in the paper. It's not in the machines. And discrediting or discarding people by saying, well, they're a part of the deep state. When in actuality, there's most of the people like Mark Cook that's on here, myself, David Clements, we haven't made money on the election. Matter of fact, it cost me millions of dollars. But this same type of mentality where then they get connected with other guys at the Turning Point USA, and I want to point to a specific event where there was a pastor event and Charlie Kirk was on the stage, and Charlie Kirk was asked about election fraud. Hey, can we have a conversation about the reality of the data that is present and inside of the voting machines? And I think what he was referring to specifically was the information coming out of Nevada. Now, at this event was a guy named List, I forget what his first name was. He was the governor of Nevada, and he's sitting there. He took pictures with Charlie Kirk, who happened to be the ex-governor of Nevada, and he is a current lobbyist and lawyer for Dominion Voting Systems. But while Charlie Kirk was on the stage, and while you had these handlers that were in the audience, and keep in mind this is an event with pastors, Charlie Kirk, when he says, yeah, we're not going to talk about that, he didn't have a reason why he wasn't going to talk about it. He just decided he wasn't going to talk about it because he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't feel that there was any, what he said is that there was no evidence of election fraud. And again, parroting the same talking points. Now, that didn't stop Tyler at Turning Point USA from getting to bed with Mike Lindell and asking Mike Lindell for a bunch of money and saying that, yeah, we definitely need safe and secure elections, while at the same time talking out the other side of their mouth and saying there's nothing wrong with the elections, leave them alone. Again, creating chaos, creating doubt, creating an environment where people don't know what to believe or not to believe. Well, on that stage, he accused a pastor, who's a pretty well-known pastor, of being a Fed. Literally called him a Fed from the stage. Called a pastor a Fed from the stage. So I don't know how you can reconcile that and say, Charlie Kirk is just maybe he's just misunderstanding things, or maybe he just doesn't understand. The reality of it is that they get to pick and choose what voice is heard and isn't heard. And right now they've chosen Scott Presler, and they've made fools of all of us. You have Turning Point USA that does all these events. They go to college campuses and they talk about the indoctrination that's happening while we are literally allowing them to stand as controlled opposition in the doorway, saying you're not allowed to look at it. A day ago, President Trump came out and talked about Chris Krebs, safest, most secure election in U.S. history, and we're going to look into it. We know that the 2020 election was stolen. Well, the reality of it is that President Trump has access to a lot more information than we do. And, I've had conversations with people that are in his cabinet. And in January of 2021, I was at the State Department when all the stuff broke out on January 6th. So I was able to meet with the, what's it called, the lawyer, the counsel for Pompeo. Pompeo snuck out the back door, literally, because we were supposed to meet. And when I had that conversation with him and when we presented this model, he looked at me with sweat coming, literally, in a very cold place. If you've ever been in a Faraday box, it's a climate-controlled environment where dignitaries go, right? So it's a place that's off-grid. Can't have phones, can't have computers. And he starts sweating in there. And he says, why would anybody do that? And I'm in there with the Deputy Secretary of State and a bunch of other important people, and we're going through how they stole the election in 2020. Now, fast forward to where we are right now. Tulsi Gabbard comes out yesterday at the same in the cabinet meeting and talks again about what's happening in the election. Now, the reason why this relates to Scott Presler and what's happening to the DOD is because President Trump is currently stripping security clearances from law firms. He's stripping security clearances from people like Chris Krebs that were directly related to the 2020 election. But on the surface, you still have the same thing that's happened. You still have the same people that are allowed to pretend that we have safe and secure elections. And people like Scott Presler can come out and say, I'm for safe and secure elections, and yeah, we need to get to the bottom of it. There's not transparency. And at the other end saying that there's no credible evidence of election fraud that exists. The problem is that we have mountains of election fraud material. We have mountains of evidence. The four Mesa County reports, I say four because there was a fourth report that was done by Jeff O'Donnell that was done clearly outlined how the machines manipulate the elections. If you go all the way back to December of 2020, we can talk about the ASOG report, which is a very detailed report on an image out of Antrim County. Matt DePerno was the attorney in that case, clearly showed and was stated that this system is designed to defraud the American people. Every single time that we went into court or created a case, they would refer back to what we could control, their controlled environments. Charlie Kirk, Scott Presler, Alex Halderman. Alex Halderman, was able to manipulate a voting machine with a pin, right? While walking by the evidence that, Mark Cook was on our show, sat down, we walked through it. We were able to use a USB drive in order to flip votes without ever touching the machine, right? Is that true, Mark?
Well, we did have to touch a machine, but the tools to manipulate votes inside that particular system are actually built into it. It doesn't even require hacking. Literally, the tools are built in. It just requires a couple of mouse clicks and some key presses. So, and I saw all this stuff firsthand, so I definitely knew it. But Scott would not listen to any of this information I had.
But every time you would talk to Scott about it, Scott would say that you're deep state or you're trying to take away people's ability to vote. He would use the same talking points on the left, but migrate them just slightly to say, hey, we have to get out there. We have to out-rig the machines. And if you remember, he was on a stage, a TPUSA stage event in July of 2024, and he stood up there and he says, if they're going to rig the elections, we have to out-rig the rig. We have to get out. We have to get out the vote. We have to get more people to vote. But every time that he would come back and tell the success that he had, he would create hyperbolic numbers that came out of nowhere. They weren't numbers that were directly related to anything. And so on one side, you could say, well, Scott Presler is just a hyperbolic liar that's just an opportunist. And then the other side, you have to connect the dots to the other things that we've forgiven for people by saying, hey, they're on our side. Well, we don't want to upset the park. Scott's doing great stuff. But you can't point to one thing that Scott did that manifested into a conclusion for a game. You can't. You can't talk about the Amish, voting and coming out, 100,000 people did, because that never happened, right? And so you have to look at it on.
Joe, speaking of the Amish,
yeah.
When I was out in Pennsylvania with the Hand Count Roadshow,
yeah.
I tried to get meetings with the Amish, and I got contact with some pretty high up people there. Yeah. And they said they just weren't interested to discuss anything election-wise. And I was pulling in to do Hand Count Roadshow all across their communities. They didn't want it. And a week later, Scott shows up and claims to register, what did he say, like 80,000 Amish? Or whatever he said. How on earth? I couldn't even get a single meeting with one. And he's registering them like crazy. I just invite him.
So here's how, this is a con, right? And I think that you need to pay attention to this. The con is if you can say that 80,000 Amish people voted and you get out on social media, but only like 6 Amish people actually have social media, and they don't particularly want to be in the media, who's going to, if a tree falls in the forest, nobody sees it fall, who actually knew it fell? I mean, they couldn't dispute it because it's not actually culturally something they do. So you're claiming to get 80,000 people to go there, and you never even walked into the living room of an Amish person. Who's going to know? The only thing you have to do.
There aren't that many Amish people.
Well, there are actually, but voting Amish, there's probably 115,000, 120,000 Amish people that can vote. But the fact is, yeah, you call them. If you count the Mennonites and the Amish, you could probably get to 120,000 people that are voting age for sure. In Pennsylvania specifically, because they have a high concentration. The point is that a vast majority of those people that would vote did vote and were registered to vote. The people that didn't wouldn't. Right, and it's split pretty evenly down there. But most people are definitely not going to talk about it. They're not going to see themselves as a pawn in some election to get one party elected over another. They try to stay out of it. They try to stay out of politics. So, and by the way, I have 2 friends that are Amish that live in Pennsylvania, and so I've had very long conversations with them about politics in a very private setting. And so I'm not talking out my ass. I don't want to speak for all Amish people, but my experience with Amish people has been one that they don't want a dog in the hunt. They don't want to get involved, right? It's culturally antithetical to who they are. So, but as people, we're always trying to figure out who do we trust, who do we not trust, right? Who do we follow, who do we not follow, and who's going to lead us off a cliff and not lead us off a cliff. And so we create these paradigm crashes all the time where we say to ourselves, well, this makes sense. Well, the reality of it is that no matter what, you can like Scott Presler as a person and recognize that dancing like a fairy on the stage and acting like a unicorn has nothing to do with the thing at hand, which is getting votes. Acting like a Kardashian or positioning yourself as the savior when you're not actually showing us anything that we can tangibly touch just makes you a loudmouth in a room full of people taking credit for things that frankly never happened. Right? It's like saying that you actually did an audit when you didn't do an audit. There was no report that you've ever done that's ever been included in an audit, aka Jovan Pulitzer. And so I look at this from the standpoint of, what do you have to tangibly show me that I know for a fact that I can point to? And there's nothing related to him. And then you have to add in the stuff about Rob Presler, his dad. I mean, the guy literally works for the disinformation unit for the DOD. And who the hell goes out and tries to raise money to buy themselves a $100,000 truck? I mean, none of it makes sense. And yet we find ourselves simping for certain individuals like it's a popularity contest inside of a high school gymnasium. And I just think that we have to take a deep breath and step back a little bit and say to ourselves, is that why are they protecting the machine? Let's hypothetically say that it's not the machines, which it is, but it's not in the machine, it's not the software, even though we've proven it. We've proven it over and over and over again. But let's hypothetically say we're to back up and say it's not that, right? Why would you try to protect something so fiercely with lawfare and defamation law? People believed it. They believed this stuff. And defamation suits have to go towards a position of balance. And the election machine companies, and this is why I try to simplify things, election machine companies, their job is to do a public good as a pseudo-government entity, right? So they're a pseudo-government entity. And so as a pseudo-government entity, their job is to work for the government in order to make the voice of the people heard, period, end stop. Well, if that's the case, and it's designed to a public good, then legally, if you look at this, you cannot sue someone for saying that your system is corrupt, that it doesn't work, when everything that's out there says, oh, we had an error here, oh, we had a mistake here, oh, we had to do an upgrade in this system here, oh, safest, most secure election in the U.S. You're criticizing a system because none of it makes sense. And if we go back to 2020, none of it made sense. November 3rd, shut down in multiple states across the country. Has it ever happened before? No. Why? And if that doesn't make sense, how does bringing in baskets of ballots at 2 o'clock in the morning make sense? Make it make sense, but they've never had to address it. They've never had to address it. And what's even worse than that is Scott Presler has never addressed it. He's walked past it. You can have a debate about things and tell me it's not the machines if you're willing to discuss it. If you're willing to become an SME, subject matter expert, and tell me it's not the machines, then you should have reason, not, well, we had 60 cases and they all got thrown out. When you're walking past other evidence that shows that the elections were, in fact, rigged across the country in all 50 states. So if you're not willing to have a discussion about it, you're hiding something from it. And every time we turn around, this controlled opposition on our side is telling us to vote harder. We got to just work harder, as if it's like a morale boost that all of a sudden we're going to run ourselves down to a place where we don't have the chance. Like it's the Pied Piper walking us off a cliff, and we don't have a chance to save the country, because it's too late by that time. And by that time, the ink's dry. The World Economic Forum is now. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying vote harder, donate more. That's basically what we're hearing from them.
And here's what I'm trying to convince everyone here. Not that Scott Presler is a bad guy. I'm trying to convince you that he's an operator. He's a con man, right? And I want you to look at it yourself. Is the guy legitimate? Is he doing what he said he would do? And by the way, if you're just intellectually honest, just to a small degree, you have to start asking the questions in an introspective way of, am I being fooled? Like, did he really do this? And if he didn't do that, why does Dad work for the DOD department that's responsible for propaganda? And oh, by the way, why does he now live in Wisconsin? Oh, and it's just none of it makes sense. And we're not allowed to ask questions about anything, and he won't address it. And I tell you what,
I've been asking him before this. I sent him a text on Wednesday. I said, Scott, it is critical that you join and address everyone's concerns to clear this all up. If anything is not true, they need to know it and hear an explanation directly from you. Here's the link. He never responded. I sent him another text this morning, actually just a couple hours ago. Please hop on now so you can clear all this up. And still nothing.
Wow.
But you're not going to get anything from it. I mean, I think that's my point, Brian. Is that, and I could go all night on this because I've seen this operation before, right? And I've been slandered up one side, down the other. I've been canceled twice from X. I'm literally suppressed on every social platform. And I have to say to myself, why? Like, why is what I'm saying so controversial, right? And remember, I'm the one that came out on the Coomer call. And they're like, oh, the Coomer call never happened. You didn't have the Coomer call. So I went through and found someone that said the Coomer call to go. And I was like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you come on my podcast. I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to give you a narrative about what happened from beginning to end. And you tell me by the end whether or not the Antifa call happened. And beginning to end, I just published it. It's out there. Beginning to end, he goes, at the very end, he's like, this is unbelievable. I was like, you didn't know any of this, did you? They're like, no, because the media creates a narrative. And the same way that the media creates a narrative to destroy people who are up there and speaking. I think I saw Holly on here. She got destroyed. Holly, are you on here? Yeah, you're on here. By the way, Holly at Altitude, she's, I think that's her. Yes. She's the one that got sued by the massive group of people that, frankly, that they slandered her. So there's no way Ash Epp, Sean Smith, they sued them and called them the equivalent of Nazi sympathizers. So, and then they had all the media publish it. The people on our side are smart, articulate people who have never wanted to be on any stage and frankly just want to get to the place where they can save the community and the country for the next generation. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate it. Some really good comments that you had. Thank you again for joining. I want to go next to Zach. Zach's been waiting for a while. Zach, go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please, if you would.
Hey there. Thanks very much, Brian, for having me on. You guys may know me as the guy who blew the whistle at Google in 2019. I still have a following on X. I haven't been canceled yet. And, Brian, I think you kind of clued me in first about this whole Scott Presler thing. And I was like, wait, these are some huge claims here. And then I started reading your tweets, talking to some other people, and realizing, oh, my God, we got a fox in the hen house. And so, there's also some more stuff coming. I think Brandon Straka is also going to do a video about this because he was going to do it independently of this group just because of how horrible he knows Scott Presler is. And, I did do the video that you guys may have seen before coming in here. Honestly, I don't know that much about the situation other than what I've got sort of debriefed in the last 72 hours. I will have to say that we do know that the elections were rigged in Pennsylvania because, and the way that they did it was that they took those ballots that came in and they switched the vote from Republican to Democrat. And so what Scott Presler said, in which he stated that Republicans didn't come out and force this season, that's just not true. We had enough to win. What they did is that they took those votes, they switched them over, thanks in part to the early voting initiatives that he's doing. So my hope with this, and this action, I spent a lot of time with this group over this last few days, is to, if we can't outright cancel Scott Presler, it's to cripple him. And even though, we don't have 10,000 people on this space, the way that I've seen this stuff work is that it just keeps on spreading. And I feel that at this point we've hit critical mass. And so I think that what's eventually going to happen is that they're just going to retire Scott Presler because they can't, like, information just sort of keeps on flowing out. And, you know, they can only lie for so much, but then they just sort of give up. They retire the asset, and then, you know, he's going to retire in his mansion and his $100,000 SUV. And they're going to get some new guy up there to take the place. And so I just want to say that we need to be hyper vigilant. I think we already know this because as soon as we let our guard down, the deep state's going to, you know, swoop in, and we won't be able to have any reasonable, you know, democratic force in this great republic that we call the United States. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate it. I want to go to Iman next since you've been waiting for so long, and then I'm going to go to Holly after that since Joe called you out. Juan, you're going to be the last speaker. If anyone else does want to speak, please request the mic and send me a message, maybe what you're going to cover. I'm a little bit hesitant if I haven't interacted with you before, but you know, please let me know. But Iman, did you want to add anything?
I'm just really glad that Zach got to get in there and talk. I'm kind of just the follow-up girl for my wheelhouse is IT, and we haven't talked about any of that yet. The app that Scott has going on and all those other things, but I would like to just put my time over to Juan, if you would be amenable to that, and then follow back up on the IT end of things, if that's cool.
Well, so I talked with Juan, and we're going to have him go last because he has so much data to present. He says he's okay with that. So if you want to just maybe briefly cover some of the IT stuff, I think it'd be a good time now. But he is going to have a lot of time at the end as the last speaker. So Iman, if you want to share, you know, any of the IT stuff now is probably the best time.
Okay, cool. I've kind of been doing the deep dive. Well, I've been doing the deep dive into Scott Presler for a while. But the thing that I've been doing the deepest dive into, and also Mia Sardinella is brilliant. We've kind of been doing the deep dive into the app, which, if people don't know, has been an absolute disaster. It's been rolled out, and it has resulted in people losing SMS ability to text because people have been reported as spammers.
You're talking about the Early Vote Action app, correct? The Early Vote Action app?
Correct. The Early Vote Action app that was put out there by Presler and was all the influencers, Eric Daughtry, everybody was just like pushing it, you know, download this before Wisconsin, because if we had downloaded this before PA, it could have maybe saved us. Yeah, no. But anyways, it's a leaky app. It pretty much pulls a lot of your personal data that you have to opt in for, but nobody pays attention to those screens. They're just like, yeah, I accept and I want to use it. And then people have found out that if they were texting people to help with Scott Presler's app, their SMS has been shut down by Apple. It's been shut down by Android. They've been reported as spammers because there's been no control. There's been no shelter to keep these people sheltered from sending all these texts. And you have to wonder if it's just they wanted to get it out there first, or if it's deliberate. And the app has been used for many different areas, including Allegheny and Pennsylvania and other areas in Pennsylvania, and every time it's been used, it results in the Democrat winning. So at one point, do we look at this and say this is incompetence, or is this deliberate?
Start looking at it right now, because there's something fishy about all that, and they are collecting probably a ton of data in that app as well.
They're collecting a ton of data, and that's the thing. And they're collecting the contact information. And it's one of those situations where if you don't read the fine print, you're opted in. And you have to read the fine print. But everybody, like good-hearted people, are like, yeah, I want to help in PA. I want to help in Wisconsin. So they just hit the I accept. And then all their contacts get shared. And then you wind up with that weird statistic that I believe Zach put up where, yeah, I got texts from Scott Presler, and I don't even live in PA, or I don't even live in Wisconsin. Well, why are you getting those texts? It's because they're...
Question on the app. Does the app actually grab all the contacts in people's phones?
Unless you opt out, which it's the dialogue that is, no, it's the dialogue that's predatory. You have to read through and say, oh no,
if you don't read through it carefully and you don't say no and you don't opt out, does it grab the contacts in your phone?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
That's
about all I need to know.
Mark, and that is why when you look at the statistics that were put up by people where did you get texts from Scott Presler and do you live in Wisconsin, the overwhelming majority was, yes, I live in Wisconsin and I didn't get texts from him. No, I don't live anywhere near Wisconsin. And I was getting spammed by him. That's why.
So data is key. Data is king in all this. And so I wrote a brief called Engineered Theft of a Superpower. And you can get that brief. You go to handcountroadshow.org. You click on the picture of the trailer, the image of that trailer on the screen, and you'll download this brief that was handed to Jim Jordan. What I have found is that they have fully engineered the election system, essentially to put on an illusion. But in the full engineering of this, grabbing people's data like that, if that person was an operative, would be exactly what they would do. Gather this mass amount of data and then use it and engineer the system in order to be able to manipulate it even better. So it's not looking good, but I appreciate you sharing that information. If I were anyone, I would remove that app off your device immediately, would be my recommendation as an IT cybersecurity professional. I would remove that app at this point.
Yeah, but Mark, I have a quick question for you, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
What? I don't know.
I said not at all. Go.
Oh, okay. The concern right now is that Scott Presler is doing this push for mail-in database, or mail-in voters, and early voting, and yada, 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 because that can give statistically a heads up to the other side for what's going on. But now you also possibly have this app. Do we know where that data is heading into a repository? Is it heading into a database?
No way to know.
Well,
of course it is. But
there is.
Know where it's going and who's using it.
There is to a certain extent, because if you look at Superfeed Technologies, who created the app, their requirements that they have to send out for what we are using your applications for are really, really limited. They're really limited. So what are they? They're sending it all to third-party data.
Of course, they most likely they may be, absolutely, and they may be selling that information as well. I did just see Marty popped up here real quick, and he only has a couple of minutes. He was actually the guy that had a direct face-to-face conversation with Scott. I'd like to bring him in just for him to pass this information on.
We can do that. We can do that, Mark. Also, is Sean Smith still on? Sean, if you're on, can you request the mic? But yeah, go ahead and go to Marty.
Okay, Marty, you just got approved there. Go ahead, Marty. Tell your story about talking to Scott directly.
And then can we get Juan back in here for a speaker?
Juan's going to go last. I talked to him about it. He's going to go last. But
come on, I have a mic. I've been taken care of. I'm
all right,
going to go when it's my turn.
Awesome.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, good. Yeah, I only have a minute. And I guess Mark mentioned about how Harmeet Dillon was Scott Presler's mentor. Probably we're looking at about 12 years now because he told us that about 10 years ago. So then looking at Harmeet's behavior over this time, when she was running against Mike Lindell for RNC chair, with Ron McDaniel there too. Harmeet, and probably some of you know the story, Harmeet specifically told Mike Lindell that if she's elected chair, she will not be working with him. So that's a little telling right there. The guy who put $40 million in his life into putting out information about the machines. You all know the story. If she's RNC chair, she doesn't want to work with him. Now, maybe she has a problem with his personality, whatever, who knows, but that transcends everything. So that says a lot. So I kind of sense a lot of connection here about the outlook of Harmeet, the outlook of Scott, and let's bring Charlie Kirk into this. Charlie is, he refuses to acknowledge the machines. He was here in Las Vegas, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. One of our folks was at a conference he was at, and he basically he pushed him off and said, "Are you a Fed?" when he was simply asking him about the machines. So Charlie's done
your
nothing.
Experience with Scott directly. Can you talk?
Well, it was specifically that one event that he did here when myself and Pam were trying to push him to get him to acknowledge machines. We did it with thinking he had an open mind about it. It's like, okay.
So you were in front of him. Just walk us through the story. You were in front of him directly, right?
Yeah, for about 10, 15 minutes. We engaged him a long time. There was a lot of people. We basically,
the interaction that you guys.
We're trying to say, hey, do you know what Mike Lindell is doing? Do you know how the machines, there's all these things we're bringing up about the machines. And he goes, well, and he was being cagey about it. And he says, well, tell you what, why don't you email me and we'll see what we can work out. So I emailed him 3 times, never got a response. And but then kind of after.
What was the statement about Harmeet?
That he basically, I don't know, he had maybe a little meltdown there, but he basically, when we were pressing him, he goes, Harmeet will kill me. And he didn't mean that, literally, I'm sure. But it was like, I cannot go against what Harmeet wants, basically, or I'll fall from her graces kind of thing. But he did use the phrase, Harmeet will kill me, in quotes. I'm not saying that she would kill him. So that was very strong right there, too. So this really leads me to believe that she's an architect behind all this. Unfortunately, she's the DOJ Civil Rights Division, whatever the head position there. That's a little scary. So I don't know. To me, that's a bad person in a high place, where we need a good person in a high place, especially in the civil rights division. So, yeah, the whole thing is bad.
Thank you, Marty. I appreciate it.
That's kind of the story. And I got to run, but I'll listen to all this later. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Marty.
Thank you, Marty. Is Sean Smith still on? Because he might have been on before, and we wanted to get him in there. And then we're going to go to Jonathan, aka Juan. If there you are, Sean. I see you. I see you now.
I'm sorry. Can I interject a second on that last point? If you want to blame somebody for Harmeet not wanting to deal with Lindell, you can blame me. And if you want to have an argument about that, we can have it offline. But I don't think he was an asset at all. And yeah, we can have that argument some other time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then Sean Smith, if you want to unmute your mic, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add a few things, and I don't think it's anything new, but this is my experience. So if you don't know who I am, I'm just a guy in Colorado. I retired from the Air Force in 2017 with no intention of ever going anywhere near anything governmental again, and then realized on election day in 2020, not looking at results, it was long before then, but reading something about turnout and doing some regression analysis on voter registration data, that there were some problems. And then, I've got a lot of cyber threat and special technical operations background, and done a lot of operational testing. And so when I started reading the voting system testing manuals and the test reports, I thought, we're in real trouble here. And the more I found and the more I saw, the more concerned I was. So I ended up connecting with some other people who were working on election integrity. I had no intention of doing that. I kind of fell into it. One of them was Holly, who's on here. One of them was Mark. Ash Epps. So Holly, Ash, and I are the three co-defendants in the NAACP's lawsuit against us, where they fraudulently claimed that we were targeting and intimidating minority voters. It's all totally false. But I was a big fan of Scott's sort of, I would call it cheerleading. I was a football player in high school, and I never really understood the purpose of cheerleaders, but I think it was helpful to get attention, enthusiasm. But once he started talking about early voting, I was very concerned, and I tried for months, probably starting in 2022 to all the way through 23 and early in 24 to engage with him, usually in X. This is my second account. I didn't have an account that whole time. Kind of like Joe, if somebody hasn't been suspended at least on social media, I don't know if I can work with them. But anyway, so I really tried to give Scott the benefit of the doubt for what he was saying about early voting and ballot harvesting, and I wasn't really looking at his claims yet about voter registration and election victories. But he just would dodge every chance. If I came into a space that he was in and tried to engage, he would stay muted or he would leave. Sometimes he would leave right away. He did, in a single space that was kind of being controlled by his friends, engage, but they muted my mic so that I couldn't respond. And what his response was basically, Maricopa and Virginia governor's race proved that early voting worked. And of course, I know a lot about Maricopa because I helped with some of the analysis and the legal work for the injunction that Kerry Lake did, and for the cases that they pursued after the 22 election. So, I've worked closely with all of the technical experts and the attorneys. And so, I knew that was false, that his claims about it, his understanding was, well, what he claimed about it was a real misrepresentation of what occurred. He was claiming that election day, there were all these risks. And I made a lot of points to him, look, that the machines are the same. Election day and the early voting machines are the same. That the people are corrupt, they're corrupt. And if you're not seeing them objecting to early voting, it's because they already are getting what they want from early voting. So anyway, I tried for months, really, I think over a year, to engage with them. He just refused. And then Mike Lindell. So I'm the president of Cause of America, a nonprofit that works to help grassroots with election integrity. And Mike asked us to come to the Turning Point USA event in Las Vegas and to address election integrity there. And I didn't know Scott was going to be speaking, but so we ended up running into each other there backstage. That wasn't a good time to talk. He was on the phone a lot. But then out in the kind of lobby area after or in between sessions, I finally approached him and said, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you and talk to you about this for a long time. And he thought I was there to get a photograph with him, which was pretty funny because I don't even take photos with Mike, really. I think as a joke, I sent Mike a photo of me with like a cardboard cutout of him. And but anyway, so Dr. Douglas Frank was right next to me when I approached Scott, and I said, Scott, I want to talk to you about early voting. And he tried to change the discussion into how Doc Frank or David Clements had, like complained about him being gay or something like that. And I just said, I'm not here to talk about that. And he said, well, those are your people. And I said, neither one of those people are cause of America, but beside the point, that's not what I want to talk to you about. And I basically just said, look, early voting enables rigging. It enables rigging because it provides data for the model that allows them to determine how much they need to eject. And enables rigging because it encourages a lot of people to break and lose chain of custody of their ballots. And he dropped the mask. So I've seen him put on several different accents. He's not as bad as Kamala Harris, but I've seen him put on different accents. But this was different. It's like his whole face, his whole persona changed. And he said, I don't care. And it was like a snarl. And that was all I needed, because once I see that somebody's capable of doing that, I know that they are probably a sociopath, honestly. But at any rate, at that point, I no longer gave him the benefit of the doubt. And you can see if you look back through the history of comments, I have tried to comment repeatedly, and he always has a lot of. First, it was kind of, I would call them like fanboys, like people who are big supporters of his. And sometimes their approach would be to try to discredit me or take some personal angle. Sometimes it would be like, if you're familiar with the meme, it would be like, leave Britney alone. Scott's such a great guy. And I was a big fan of what he did, like with the trash cleanup in Baltimore. I'm glad to have him register people. I just didn't want him pushing early voting. And we came to find out because of the relationship with Turning Point. So Turning Point had offered Mike what they like access to a white label version of their app. So this is a super feed app, the same one TPUSA uses, same one I think Patriot, whatever it is, Action uses, and the same one that Scott uses for early vote action. And we would have been glad for it, but we had already been, Ashley, Holly, and I had already been sued by the NAACP, and one of the things that we learned from that, so part of the reason that we continued in that lawsuit, we didn't just settle or, we didn't fold, is because right from the beginning, we had just absolutely airtight approaches. Our data was direct for the Secretary of State. We had complete lineage and provenance for every door that anybody knocked. We could show the exact method by which we randomly selected, and by which we had selected precincts based on a specific sort of voting behavior. So it didn't have anything to do with race or anything like that with political party. In fact, we didn't even get the race information with that. So, and because we had that background, and because all of our training and our legal documentation, and because we handle everything, because that was our defense, and it was our defense. I mean, it kept us from being essentially starved by the law.
Basically implementing the integrity initiative. And for those who don't know, I think you said it, you were serving work.
All right, this is MAGAMind Podcast. Brian Ference at Brian Ference 1. Thank you all and have a good night. God bless.